Y'all have a giant up there. I got to say something because you're from Baltimore, and I've been studying this man's philosophy for years, and I just love him. I wish God would have blessed me to meet him. He didn't, but I met you, and I know you know something about Mr. Pyron Mitchell.
Pyron J.
That man helped to create the so-called 8A program, the so-called DBE program, the so-called business enterprise, which they tricked us again, and they're not calling it Black enterprises, they're calling it DBE, or disadvantaged businesses.
Or
That's
minority.
real slick. That's real slick because what it does is
takes Black out of it.
Sir?
Takes Black out of it.
It takes Black out of it.
Yeah.
It takes Black out of it, and it allows Caucasian females who were 40% slave owners. 40% of the slaves were owned by Caucasian females.
We have a Baltimore business listed as a MBE, minority business enterprise, and they're Portuguese.
That's right.
Slave owners. Right. Slave owners.
Slave owners. And so what you do is in every city, only about 1 to 3% of the so-called DBE works actually go to Black companies.
Black city, Black mayor, 2%.
Right.
New York, Baltimore.
Right.
It's across the country. It pardon the language, urinates on the legacy that Pyron J. Mitchell started.
It does. And most of your Black politicians
don't even know it.
That are disconnected. That's why I say you got to have the Black politician, activists, the economic activists, and the social activists in one room together so that we can share intelligence. See, if you're a politician, you can't write a Black agenda without a social arm.
No.
You can't, because you don't know the history. And if you don't know the history, you don't even know the purpose of what these people were doing for us. So you lose the purpose, shift the agenda by changing the name from Black to disadvantage. See, Black and disadvantage ain't synonymous.
Yeah.
That's the reason why it's real important to call it the new Black Wall Street market. At first, it was going to be called just New Wall Street market, but no, it's the new Black Wall Street market. When you're stripped of identity, you don't have a purpose. They neutralize you. You have no power. If we have, and the people who know about the 8A program or the DBE program, they don't usually share that intelligence with the little businessman who don't know. So all of us have to become a word that I quote, as social entrepreneurs. We can't just be social activists. We can't just be economic activists. We can't just be talking about we need to vote. We have to become social entrepreneurs and see the big picture. And it starts with a Black business district. How do you recycle the Black dollar? Can you recycle the Black dollar realistically if all of the Black businesses are spread out to where you got to travel 10 miles to get ice cream, Black business, 10 miles to get a haircut, Black business, 10 miles to get a coffee shop? Well, it's not feasible. It's smarter to create a Black business district. That way you have, I noticed that the Greeks have Greek Town. The Chinese have, and they're in every city where they are, a number of them. You have Chinatown, all right? You Little Havana, you know? Well, why does it have to be hate if I say we need a new Black business district? And what can the common politician do to aid that? I see a lot that he could do. Number one, you can make us tax exempt. Why not? Number two, whenever we start building a historically Black business district, rebuilding what you tore down through urban renewal policies and so-called integration and this fake I have a dream business. Well, what you can do is if I put up $10, match me. For whatever real estate we deem, and we carve out an area and make that area the Black business district, but it has to be called Black. We need that in order to employ our young people. Our young people are not disrespectful, really. They're disconnected. How do you justify your time on this planet and you don't own anything that your children can inherit? Well, we don't own nothing. And that's a sin. God don't create nothing without aim and purpose. What is our purpose for being here if we can't even leave anything to our children and grandchildren? What good is it to live and we can't leave nothing? And how can we recycle the Black dollar under some so-called integration? Are you hating white people? Are Greeks hating white people if they set up Greektown? Are Chinese hating white people if they set up Chinatown? They got plenty of Black people. White folk can come to a Black business district. You always came to a Black business district. You came to look at our entertainment that you didn't control at that time. You took control of Black entertainment by killing the so-called Chitlin Circuit. If we don't own a building, then you can tell us that Farrakhan can't come into Jacob Javits Center because we don't own it. So we have to get, and this is the motto and the theme of Mr. Bill Allen: ownership, ownership, ownership. Our rappers, and you have to forgive me for being so passionate, Brother Donnie. I'm sorry. But
no apology necessary.
I mean, man, when you start thinking about the game that's been run on us, man, we want to recycle the Black dollar. You can't recycle the Black dollar without having a Black business district. And we have to create an online presence to where people can purchase online. I was thinking to myself, and I just did a little quick number, but when the minister called for 1 million and 2 million Black men showed up.
Before social media.
Before social media. See, God was using him to show us something.
An example.
It's something the Million Man March should be studied, because the minister, and I went to a lot of those cities, went city to city talking to men. And the men responded. He didn't pay their way to Washington, D.C. We got there from the South, man. In fact, we had busloads come out of Louisiana. David Banner was the SGA president, David Banner, the rapper, at Southern University. And we had busloads of young people coming. When I went to the new Black Wall Street market, it felt like I walked through a time capsule, and it was a day after the Million Man March, because the energy and the peace was so high, and Black folks were so eager to spend with Black people. But it has to be highlighted. Now listen to this. What if 1 million, we got 40, some people say 50, 60 million Black folk in America. But what if just 1 million on the lowest of the lowest end spent $100 in the new Black Wall Street market annually? Now that's not even big. That's annually.
One pair of shoes.
Just annually.
One coat.
You know how much money that is, Brother Donnie? That's $100 million. What if they spent 200, 300, 350, like Jay Morrison said? Do you know the economic impact now? The social activists and the political activists has to push what the economic activist is proposing. It's like fighting. You're using your jab to set up what you really want to do in the economics, this thing with power, but they all work together for the good of those who love the Lord and are called to his purpose.
Or as they say in the streets, everybody staying in their lane.
Everybody staying in their lane, but everybody pushing in their lane. No idleness. Idleness is the worst thing that we could ever do, is be idle. That's the original sin. Not being with a woman, God didn't intend for us to be idle in a universe full of motion. And the man is the one to move first, not the woman. We love our women, but the person to move first is the man. All right, we got 100 million, and we got the social activists and the political activists talking together. The media, the black media, has to write and talk about our victories. Who wants to go home and tell their children every day how they got their behind kicked and celebrate the kicking of our behind? Every time black men win, it should be highlighted, and our women should be screaming to the top of their voice for the kind of men we are and what we built for them. Somebody's telling me some bad stuff about black men. I asked the question. I said, you heard about Black Wall Street over 100 years ago? And men ain't this and men. I say, who built it? Black men built it for black women and black children. We need to highlight that.
A lot of them were soldiers.